that Henry Cavill had a mid-credit cameo in Black Adam. Can you elaborate?
That's basically it. He shows up in a mid-credit sequence that was obviously shot in bits and pieces. I don't think they were ever on set together, and that's fine, whatever. That's how movies are made. But it's a very generic, hey, look, it's Superman kind of credit cameo. Um, and Henry Cavill released a video on Monday saying that, yes, this means I'm back. I am going to play Superman again in the the DCEU or DC films or whatever the heck you want to call it today, because it seems to change every other day. Now, does that mean we're going to get a new solo Superman film that's a glorified sequel to Man of Steel? Does that mean he's going to pop up as an added value element in other DC films, like we've seen with Mark Ruffalo's Hulk in the MCU? Probably both. I mean, my feelings on the bankability of another Man of Steel movie notwithstanding, I mean, it's not my money. If they want to go for it, go for it. But then we got word, I believe later that day, or was it Tuesday? I don't remember. No, it was Tuesday. I apologize. Where we got word that Peter Safran, who is a longtime producer with Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema, he was one of the producers for many of the Conjuring films, as well as Shazam and Aquaman, which are two of my favorite DC films, by the way, or my two favorite films from the Conjuring universe, because Annabelle is in both of them. He is going to be involved. He's going to be basically the head of DC Studios from the commercial business point of view, while James Gunn, who directed Suicide Squad, which got rave reviews last summer, and who shepherded Peacemaker, which got pretty strong viewership and pretty strong reviews on HBO Max earlier this year, he's going to be sort of the artistic Kevin Feige of the DC studios, as they're calling it now. So the hierarchy of power really did change in the DC universe, just maybe not the way we all thought it would. The short version of my thoughts on this news: it's a perfectly solid pick. I do think it's kind of funny that James Gunn is getting the keys to the castle after making a movie that was a huge box office bomb. A film that I like it, I think it's very good, but even in non-COVID times would have been probably a financial disappointment, because this first Suicide Squad was not terribly well liked, and this was an $180 million R-rated sequel to Suicide Squad that did not have the three biggest elements of that film's predecessor: Will Smith, Batman, and Joker. So the question I'm going to ask, to the extent that it matters, is would James Gunn, the executive, green light the movie that James Gunn, the filmmaker, was allowed to make? And I don't know the answer to that question. Now,
So,
to be
what was
fair,
the response to this news? Because it
almost
seemed like it
overwhelmingly
shook
positive.
overwhelmingly positive.
I mean, there are diehard Zack Snyder fans that honestly thought that somehow miraculously he was still going to be welcomed back with open arms, but that was never going to happen. I mean, the world has moved on. The only reason we got Zack Snyder's Justice League was because we were in a global pandemic, post-production houses were in turmoil, and HBO Max needed new buzzy content. um but that wasn't, that was the end of something. That was the beginning of something. um but other than that, I mean, I think the most important thing right now, and it's no secret, I'm a fan of the films that Walter Hamada made, and I think he got a raw deal in terms of the perception of his performance. But I think the one thing that Gunn and Safran need, that hopefully they will get, is time. They need several years to do whatever it is they're going to do, uninterrupted and unimpeded by shifting corporate leadership and shifting corporate priorities.
Do you
And if they
think they'll
can
get
get
that
that,
time?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you think they will get that time?
I'd like to be optimistic and assume as much.
Okay.
But again, I mean, the circumstances that took place between 2020 and now were unprecedented in modern entertainment history. And
Hmm.
I'm not just talking about the pandemic. Minor detail that being, um, is in terms of the whole, everything, let's put all our bags in HBO Max, said AT&T, and now Discovery says, no, 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 let's put our emphasis on theatrical again, and let's not make films and TV shows that are incredibly expensive that will just be on HBO Max. So it was a completely 180-degree turn from A to B, and DC Films kind of got caught in the middle of that. Again, this is not good and evil. This is not right or wrong. I have mixed feelings about both of these strategies. Um, but I think Gunn is a very creative and interesting filmmaker, and he is a filmmaker. So he's going to have, he's not just a number cruncher that wants to boost the quarterly profit margins for shareholders. I think there is value in allowing filmmakers to be executives to a certain extent. The example that I threw out, and I know John Lasseter left under very dishonorable circumstances, and if by some fluke anyone else gets caught under similar circumstances, the open window will be just as wide to throw them out too. That being said, the idea of letting John Lasseter, who had been incredibly successful as a filmmaker at Pixar, just basically run the whole Disney animation department in 2006 was an inspired idea, and commercially and artistically it worked out just fine. Again, I'm not minimizing the allegations of serial sexual harassment that forced Lasseter to go, but that can be separated from the mentality that allowed him to be given the Kings of the Kingdom in the first place.
So now they are co-CEOs and co-chairs of DC Studios, and this is replacing DC Films. So can you break down for us what that means? Is that just Is this signifying a big change in the direction DC's going, or is this just kind of a name change only?
I think they certainly want to sell it as a huge change, and I can be optimistic and assume that things will either change, or at least they'll be able to make the movies that they want to make without much corporate overreach and or micromanagement. But will that be the case? Will it just be, Gunn and Safran basically doing the kind of things that Hamada was already doing? Varied, DC comics adaptations that are varied in tone and scale and budget and genre, and try to sell it as something new and different from the old guard? Sure, whatever. And fine. I'm not going to pass moral judgment on that. Are they going to try to turn DC into the next Marvel in terms of having this very tight continuity where everything is connected, yada, yada, yada? I don't think so, because for two reasons. A, they've tried that before and it didn't quite work. Second of all, again, before COVID, I think the Hamada strategy was working pretty well. And third of all, I mean, Marvel, the extent to which every Marvel film is explicitly connected and all part of one giant story is somewhat exaggerated by the way the films are marketed and covered in the media. Most Marvel movies are, I would say, 80 to 90% standalone, in that you can walk into Ant-Man without having seen Avengers Age of Ultron and be okay. You can walk into Black Panther without having seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and be okay. There are some Marvel movies that I would consider mythology episodes, like Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, maybe Thor Ragnarok, and obviously the Avengers movies, but it's a good bet that anyone that remotely follows Marvel has watched the Avengers movies. So that's a pretty safe place to put your big game-changing events. Otherwise, the movies are pretty standalone and user-friendly, to the point where if you've seen Thor 1, 2, and 3, you can follow Thor Love and Thunder just fine. And even if you haven't, there's a lot of past tense exposition in Thor Love and Thunder for those that haven't seen Thor Ragnarok, or haven't seen Thor Ragnarok since it was in theaters and maybe didn't take notes. So that being said, I'm hopeful that the next phase of DC Studios, whatever that is, will remember that Kevin Feige's MCU uses the interconnectivity as a seasoning, not as the main course.
So we did see last week Cavill's cameo as Superman. Do you think that would have happened if there wasn't this changing of the guard, or was that happening regardless?
I don't think that would have happened if there wasn't a changing of the guard, because I know Walter Hamada didn't want it. And he was under the opinion, and I don't want to speak for him, and I'm not casting a moral judgment either way, is that, he was kind of hired to break away from the Snyder continuity and the Snyder legacy and the Snyder fan base, all due respect. So I think anything that might convince that fan base that they were still at the front of the debate table I think the Snyder Cut of Justice League did enough damage as is in that sense. Again, it's I think it's a better film than the theatrical cut of Justice League. In fact, I think it's actually better than most of the comic book movies that came out in 2021, all due respect, other than maybe Shang-Chi, which I quite enjoyed. Um, but I do know that allegedly Dwayne Johnson went behind Walter Amada's back and got permission from DeLuca and God help me, I don't know who the other person that was brought in to oversee from MGM. Warner Brothers, DeLuca, and I'm Abby. I'm Abdi. I apologize. DeLuke is a name that rolls off the tongue. Abdi is not. I'll just have to start memorizing that because they are a team. And anyway, so got permission for that. And I think Dwayne Johnson likes Henry Cavill. I think his ex-wife is Henry Cavill's agent, but I do know there's some connection there. I'll have to look that up later. So this wasn't necessarily Dwayne Johnson listening to the fans and giving the fans what they want, although he's smart enough to know that he's playing all sides. He's playing to that fan base. He's playing to those that want DC to be more dominant in the pop culture universe. And he's also playing for, Dwayne Johnson, who wants Black Adam to be one of the top dogs in that continuity. So to a certain extent, he was selling the notion that no, Black Adam is too big to worry about Shazam right now. He wants to go up against Superman because Superman is, of course, the top banana in the DC world. Now, again, this is not good and evil. I was a little annoyed by that because Shazam was already the star of a well-reviewed and well-liked blockbuster, while Black Adam was not yet. But whatever. This is all marketing and media narrative over a bunch of big budget comic book superhero films.
So if you were to take a guess, who's getting their solo movie and who's going to be the added element, either Black Adam or Superman?
I'm guessing there's more long-term value in. That's a good question, to be honest, and I don't know the answer to that. Because on one hand, I think you get a lot of good PR from greenlighting a Superman movie. The question is, there's still a chance that Superman is more well known than popular. That he's a character like, relatively speaking, Robin Hood, King Arthur, and Peter Pan. Everybody knows them, but that doesn't mean everybody wants to see a movie about them.
So is Superman a butts and seats superhero?
I don't think he is to the point that everybody among perpetually online thinks he is. I mean, the first Superman was a huge smash in 1978. Superman 2 was a well-liked follow-up to that film in 1981. But we haven't had an unquestionably successful Superman movie in 41 years.
That's a long time.
Superman 3 was disappointing. Superman 4 was a bomb. Supergirl was a bomb. Superman Returns was a huge disappointment in relation to cost. Man of Steel was a disappointment in relation to cost. Batman v Superman made a lot of money, but I got terrible reviews. It was miserably front-loaded. It's the most front-loaded movie ever to open above $100 million at the domestic box office. So there's a reason why Warner Brothers panicked after that film came out. The choices they made, right or wrong, that's up for debate, but it was certainly understandable that the reception of Batman v Superman would call into question their long-term plans for the DC universe.
So is Henry Cavill a beloved Superman? How does he rank in terms of these iconic Supermen?
I think to those who are not among Perpetually Online, he's an absolutely irrelevant Superman. He's played the role 3 times. Not counting, again, as far as I know, he didn't do any research for Zack Snyder's Justice League. So basically, he made Justice League, he made Dawn of Justice, he made Man of Steel. All 3 of those films got mixed to negative reviews. All 3 films were commercial disappointments in one sense or another. Now, the weird skewed change of that is in the last several years, he has been a part of, he was the villain in Mission Impossible 6 and got rave reviews and lots of buzz for that. He's been the star of Netflix's The Witcher, which is a huge smash for Netflix. He is a major supporting role in Enola Holmes, which was a big hit in 2020, and there's a sequel opening next week on Netflix. So we could have a weird skewed situation where Henry Cavill is enough of a known entity, has become enough of a known entity since 2015 or 2017, that the idea of him returning to Superman is more of an added value element than it would have been in 2015, 2017, etc.